In the glamorous world of the bold and the beautiful, where love, betrayal, and heartache intertwine, the latest developments promise to shake the foundations of relationships, causing irreversible damage and forcing some hard truths to come to light. The spotlight is on Nick Marone and Brooke Logan, two characters who have navigated the unpredictable tides of romance before, but whose paths have now converged in a way that no one saw coming. Nick, determined to finally win Brooke's heart, plans an intimate, heartfelt proposal at a place that holds significant meaning, an isolated beach where many memories with Brooke have been made, but where the shadow of Ridge Forrester's past still lingers. With everything in place, Nick prepares for the moment that could change everything, the moment he believes will finally cement their future together. But when the time comes for the big question, it's not the answer Nick was hoping for. In a crushing blow, Brooke rejects his proposal, leaving Nick devastated and heartbroken. In the wake of the rejection, a disillusioned Nick writes a farewell letter, explaining that he's leaving Los Angeles so that Brooke can be free to choose Rich, the man she's always truly loved. What should have been a final goodbye, however, takes an unexpected turn when the letter is lost. Instead of reaching its intended recipient, it falls into the hands of none other than Ridge Forrester. Ridge, ever the man caught between the love of two women, sees Nick's letter as the challenge he's been waiting for, the final sign that he must act to win Brooke's heart once and for all. What happens next is a roller coaster of emotion, determination, and finally, a showdown that will determine whether or not Brooke will ever choose Ridge over Nick. It all begins with that fateful beachside proposal, a moment that changes everything for everyone involved. The beach was supposed to be perfect. A place where the sun set just right, where the ocean waves crashed in rhythm, and where Nick Marone planned to ask Brooke Logan the most important question of his life. For months, Nick had been harboring feelings for Brooke, convinced that despite her complicated history with Ridge, there was still a chance for them. He had been patient, understanding her hesitations, and putting up with the lingering influence of Ridge in her life. But Nick believed this was their moment. This was his time to finally step up and claim the future he knew they could have together. The beach had always been a place of reflection for Brooke, and Nick knew this would be the perfect setting to prove his commitment to her. He had planned everything meticulously. The flowers, the private dinner on the beach, the soft glow of lanterns lining the shoreline, it was all set up for the perfect evening. As he waited for Brooke, his heart pounded with anticipation. He could see it in his mind. The look on her face when he got down on one knee, the sparkle in her eyes as she accepted his proposal, and the life they would build together. It was going to be beautiful, perfect, the culmination of everything he had worked for. As Brooke arrived, the tension was palpable. There was a moment when she looked at him, her face betraying a mixture of affection and uncertainty. She had always been kind to him, always supportive, but something in her eyes told Nick that there was more she wasn't saying. But that didn't matter to Nick. This was his moment to make her see what they could be together. As he dropped to one knee, he felt a surge of excitement and love. "Brooke, will you marry me?" he asked, the words carrying all the weight of his hope. He watched her face for a sign, waiting for her to say yes. But instead, Brooke hesitated. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Nick's heart sank as she looked away, struggling to find the right words. And then, finally, she spoke. "Nick, I can't. I'm sorry, but I can't marry you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words struck Nick like a physical blow. He had known this moment might come, but the pain of hearing it, of realizing that the woman he loved could never be his, was something he hadn't prepared for. Brooke's face was filled with regret, but there was a certainty in her eyes that left no room for doubt. She wasn't going to marry him. She couldn't. The rejection cut deeper than anything Nick had ever experienced. It wasn't that he didn't understand why she felt the way she did. He knew that Brooke's heart was always tied to Rich. But to hear it so plainly, so decisively, was devastating. It was as if all the hope, all the dreams he had built around her, had been dashed in an instant. After the moment of rejection, Nick tried to hold himself together. He didn't want to let Brooke see how much it hurt, but the sadness in his eyes was impossible to hide. He stood up, but instead of being angry or frustrated, he simply felt empty. Brooke apologized again, but Nick couldn't bear to hear the words. He simply nodded and turned away. Later that night, as he sat alone in his hotel room, Nick's emotions overwhelmed him. He had done everything right. He had been patient, understanding, supportive, but in the end, it wasn't enough. He knew he had to let go. He couldn't keep fighting for a woman who would always belong to someone else. So, in a moment of sorrow and clarity, Nick wrote her a letter. In it, he explained his decision to leave Los Angeles, to give Brooke the space she needed to finally choose Rich. He didn't want to stand in the way anymore. If Brooke was ever going to have the chance to be with Rich, Nick would remove himself from the equation. He hoped the letter would reach Brooke, that she would understand his choice. But fate had other plans. The letter was lost. Somehow, it ended up in Ridge's hands. Ridge had always known that Nick's feelings for Brooke ran deep, but he had never anticipated that Nick would be willing to give up so easily. When he read the letter, a flood of emotions overtook him. For the first time in a long time, Ridge saw Nick's departure as a challenge, one that he couldn't ignore. It was as if Nick had handed him the chance to prove, once and for all, that he was the man for Brooke. Ridge had always been torn between his love for Brooke and the pull of his past. He had hurt her. He had lost her. But now, with the letter in his hands, Ridge saw this as a sign. It was time to stop running from his feelings. It was time to show Brooke that he would fight for her, that he wouldn't back down. Ridge immediately began making plans. He knew it wouldn't be easy. Brooke had been hurt by his past actions, and Nick had been patient and kind, everything Ridge hadn't been. But this time, Ridge wasn't going to let fear or doubt hold him back. He was going to prove to Brooke that he was the man she could trust, the man she could love. It wouldn't be about the past anymore. It would be about the future. And Ridge was ready to fight for it. As he approached Brooke, Ridge could see the uncertainty in her eyes. She had been through so much with him, so many highs and lows. But this time, Ridge was different. This time, he was all in. He wasn't going to walk away, not again. "Brooke," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm here to stay, and I want to prove that I can be the man you need, the man you deserve." Brooke looked at him, stunned. She had never seen Ridge so determined, so certain. For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this time, Ridge was finally ready to give her the love she had always wanted. And just like that, the stage was set for a showdown of emotions, a battle between two men who had loved Brooke, each in their own way. Nick was gone, but his letter had sparked something in Ridge, a fire that wouldn't be extinguished until Brooke finally made a choice. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Ridge wasn't going to give up this time. Not without a fight. In the world of the bold and the beautiful, every moment is a storm of emotions, decisions, and the endless tug-of-war between love and heartbreak. The story that unfolds between Nick Marone, Brooke Logan, and Ridge Forrester is no exception. What started with a whirlwind of passion and romance has, over the years, shifted into a complex web of uncertainty, regret, and unresolved feelings. As time has passed, both Nick and Brooke have struggled to find their way together, but in the end, Brooke's heart has always remained caught between the past with Ridge and the present with Nick. But now, with the latest twist in their tale, Nick is ready to let go. Offering one final goodbye that will reshape everything, leaving Ridge to seize the moment and try once more to win Brooke's heart for good. Nick had always been there for Brooke. He had been the steady, reliable presence in her life when things with Ridge were tumultuous, when the mistakes of the past were too much to bear, and when the weight of family drama became unbearable. But despite everything they had shared, those tender moments, the love that seemed to grow with each passing day. Brooke's heart always remained tethered to Ridge. Nick knew it, and Brooke knew it. It was a truth that neither could deny, no matter how hard they tried to rewrite their story. Over time, Brooke had begun to see Nick as the man who would always be there to catch her when she fell. But in the quiet spaces of their relationship, she couldn't ignore the fact that her love for Ridge was still there, still alive, like a flame that wouldn't be extinguished no matter how hard she tried to smother it. Nick understood this, and after everything, he knew it was time to finally let go. He knew that no matter how much he cared for Brooke, no matter how much he wanted to build a life with her, he couldn't continue to live in her shadow. He couldn't be the man who was always second best, always fighting for a place in her heart that was already occupied. So, with a heavy heart, Nick decided it was time to step aside and let Brooke be free. He didn't want to fight for her anymore, not because he didn't love her, but because he loved her enough to give her the space to choose her true happiness. But instead of a dramatic confrontation or a grand gesture of letting her go, Nick decided to take a quieter route. It wasn't going to be a public farewell, nor would it be filled with promises of what could have been. Instead, Nick asked Katie, his trusted confidant and sister-in-law, to arrange a private meeting with Brooke. There, in the quiet confines of an old studio. One that had once served as the backdrop to so many of Brooke's memories, both happy and painful. Nick simply wanted to say goodbye. No fanfare. No demands. Just a moment of closure. It was a simple gesture, an expression of gratitude for all the years they had shared. He would thank her for the love they had experienced, for the times they had fought for their relationship, and for the moments of joy they had found together. And that would be it. He wasn't going to ask her to change her mind. He wasn't going to make her choose him. He just wanted one final moment to hold her in his arms, a farewell to the woman he had loved. The day of the meeting arrived, and Nick stood at the entrance of the studio, his heart heavy with the weight of his decision. He had hoped, at some point, that things might have been different. But deep down, he knew the truth. This was the end of the line for them. Brooke was the love of his life, but she would never be his, not in the way he had always dreamed. As he stepped into the studio, he saw her there, waiting, her face a mixture of confusion and sorrow. She had agreed to meet him, but she wasn't sure what this meeting would bring. When Nick walked over to her, he took a deep breath and simply said, "Brooke, thank you. For everything. For all the love and support, for being a part of my life. But I know now that it's time for me to move on. I can't keep living in the shadows of the past, and I know that your heart belongs to someone else. I just want you to be happy." Brooke looked at him, her eyes filled with unshed tears. She had always admired Nick's strength, his unyielding love for her, but she had never been able to give him the same depth of love. She had tried, and she had hoped that one day she could be the woman he needed, but deep inside, she knew the truth. Her heart would always belong to Ridge. As Nick reached out and pulled her into an embrace, it was a moment of quiet sorrow. There were no dramatic declarations, no accusations. Just two people, in the quiet of an old studio, acknowledging the end of a chapter. The embrace lasted a little longer than either of them expected, as though both of them were unwilling to let go of the past, but in the end, they did. With a final kiss on the forehead, Nick turned and left, walking away from the life he had once imagined with Brooke. But as Nick walked away, the door to the studio opened, and in walked Ridge Forrester. He was unaware of Nick's visit, but what he did know was that this was his moment. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when Brooke would finally see him, not as the man who had hurt her, but as the man who was willing to do whatever it took to prove his love for her. Ridge had always struggled with his feelings for Brooke. He had hurt her, betrayed her, and walked away from her more times than either of them could count. But something had changed. Ridge realized that if he was going to have any chance of winning her back, he had to show her, once and for all, that he was the man she could rely on, the man she could trust with her heart. With Nick gone, Ridge saw an opportunity. He knew that Brooke had been hurt by his past actions, but he also knew that the love they shared was still there, just beneath the surface. This time, Ridge wasn't going to let her slip away. He was going to fight for her not with grand gestures, but with actions that showed he was ready to commit, to build a life with her, and to finally put their past behind them. It was time for Ridge to show Brooke that he could be the man she deserved, the man who would stand by her through thick and thin. With determination in his eyes, Ridge approached Brooke. "I'm not going to let you walk away again," he said. "This time, I'm here for good. I'm here to prove to you that I'm the man who will never leave, never walk away. I'm ready to fight for us, Brooke. For our family, for everything we've built together. This time, there's no turning back." Brooke's eyes softened as she listened to Ridge's words. She had heard them before, many times in fact. But this time, something felt different. Ridge wasn't just speaking from a place of regret. He was speaking from a place of conviction, of real change. The love between them was still there, undeniable and fierce, and as Ridge reached out to her, Brooke felt the familiar pull of her heart toward him. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she was willing to let herself believe that it could be different this time. That this time, Ridge could be the man she had always hoped he would be. As the door to the studio closed behind them, the future seemed uncertain, but one thing was clear: Brooke's heart was no longer divided. She had made her choice. Ridge had finally come back to her, not as the man who had hurt her in the past, but as the man she could trust with her future. The shadows of Nick's love had finally faded, and for Brooke, it was time to start anew with Ridge, a man who had finally shown he was ready to be the partner she had always needed.